Ever since I first played the Pac-Man collection on Game Boy Advance, I've been hooked on the series. Even if some of the games have been put into several different collections and individually re-released countless times, collections that are purely Pac-Man-centric aren't as common as you might think. So when Pac-Man Museum Plus was announced a few months ago, it certainly had my interest. But is this new collection worth your time? Let's check it out. The first thing you'll notice going in is that the way the content is presented to you is way different than typical game compilations, as you're given an arcade to move a 3D Pac-Man model around in to navigate to the games you want to play, instead of being given a simple list. The arcade is also customizable, allowing you to place machines and other furniture anywhere you please. In addition, you can also customize the wallpaper and flooring of the arcade. As you play, more characters will come into your arcade to visit to make it feel populated. This is all pretty nice, but the aesthetics definitely don't make it feel like a museum. I feel like a more appropriate title for the game would have been Pac Man Arcade, or something like that, but I guess they wanted to keep similar branding to the Namco Museum series. Of course, if you don't care about any of this, or find the navigation confusing, you can just select the game you want to play from a list, and those games are the real meat and potatoes behind all of this fancy presentation. So let's take a brief look at all 14 games. First up, we have the original Pac-Man. And well, is it worth saying much here? It's the arcade version that everyone has played at least once, and I myself have played it a lot over the years. But that doesn't mean I've ever been particularly great at it. But playing it here made me think that I had really gotten rusty. But then I realized that the inputs felt really laggy. I went back and played the 2016 individual release of Pac-Man on the same console, and it felt much more responsive there. And sadly, by comparison, it makes the version in this collection feel almost unplayable, especially when the game starts speeding up. So sadly, while this is a classic game, it's rendered almost unplayable here. Next up is Super Pac-Man. I've personally never been a big fan of this game, as I felt the mechanic of eating keys and unlocking doors felt really clunky. Also, I had a Super Pac-Man plug-and-play when I was a kid, and tripped on the cord, which caused me to fall down a flight of wooden stairs and split my head open. So that might also have something to do with why I don't care much for it these days. The new Super Power-Up is pretty cool. I always liked flying over the ghosts and busting through locked doors, but if you hit the speed up button, it's basically uncontrollable, as once again the latency issues with the original Pac-Man persist through here as well. In fact, I'm gonna go ahead and save some time by saying that the input lag is present on every emulated game in this collection. I already wasn't big on it, but this is definitely the worst way I've ever played Super Pac-Man. But then again, at least it didn't injure me. Pac and Pal was originally only widely released in Japan. Midway tested it in a few arcades with a localized ROM called Pac Man and Chomp, but that version is practically lost, with very few images of that cabinet even existing. It's built off of Super Pac-Man's hardware, but is a bit more mellow in comparison. You have to flip over cards to unlock the doors to the fruits, and then you can either go to them and eat them yourself, or let your pal Miru grab them and take them to the ghost house. However, if you're going for a high score, you'll want to eat them all yourself. Instead of power pellets, you get a variety of power-ups to temporarily incapacitate the ghosts. It's a little strange, but it can be fun at the same time. And the latency doesn't totally make it unplayable, in my experience at least. Pacland is a side-scrolling platformer based on the Hanna-Barbera cartoon from 1982, and is said to be one of Shigeru Miyamoto's inspirations towards creating Super Mario Bros. Depending on where you play this game, it can be a little weird to control, as the original arcade machine used buttons to move Pac-Man left and right, instead of a joystick. And most home ports at the time tried to replicate this style of control, which can feel unnatural for people used to playing literally any other platformers. However, here the movement controls are mapped to the D-pad, which will probably satisfy most people who are unfamiliar with it going in. If you can compensate for the lag, I think there's some fun to be had here. Pacmania was a sort of reimagining of Pac-Man played from an isometric perspective, with nicely detailed sprites and really catchy music to accompany the different stages in the game. But the biggest game changer here is the jump button, which feels like a get-out-of-jail-free card until you encounter ghosts that can jump as well. I always like this one simply for the music, especially Pac-Man's part, which has been remixed countless times. The lag does kind of mess up the jumping mechanic though, unfortunately. Pac Attack is a puzzle game that was originally released on consoles of the time. The version here is the Super Nintendo version, which is interesting as previous collections used the Genesis version. This is a falling block puzzle game where your main goal is to line up ghosts in a way where Pac-Man can easily clear them out when you drop him. I've personally never been fond of any version of Pac Attack, but it could be fun for some, I suppose. Pac in Time is a special title on here, as this is the first time it's officially been re-released. But did you know this game didn't even start out as a Pac-Man game? This was originally an Amiga game called Fury of the Furries, developed by Callisto Software. Namco licensed the game from them and reskinned it as a Pac-Man game. This is a fast-paced platformer where you have to navigate each stage to eat all the dots and then find the exit. You get a variety of power-ups to help make your way through, like fireballs and a rope that lets you swing off platforms above you. I'll admit that I haven't dedicated too much time to this particular game, but what I have played I wasn't too fond of, and again, the lag present in the emulation certainly doesn't help. What really strikes me as odd here, however, is that for whatever reason, this collection uses the Japanese ROM of the game, even though it did come out in the United States. So during the intro, they overlay these subtitles, which makes everything look really cheap. You mean to tell me they can edit Miss Pac-Man's sprite for legal reasons, but can't transfer those edits to the English version as well? Just seems really lazy in my eyes. Pac Man Arrangement is the last retro arcade game included. This was a part of the Namco Classic Collection series from 1996, and it's neat to see this, as I don't believe this has been released since the PS2 and GameCube version of Namco Museum, and that came out 20 years ago. Though, unfortunately, the lag ruins later parts of the game that have a lot of turns, as you'll easily miss them. As long as you're not playing for a high score though, you can bum rush your way to the end of this game as long as you have enough tokens. And you heard that right. Unlike the old games, this game actually has an ending. This is a charming little rendition of Pac-Man that I think did a good job of freshening up the formula in 1996. I just hope someday we can see the other Namco Arrangement games get some love. Pac Man Arrangement later got remade for the PSP as a part of the Namco Museum Battle Collection in 2005. Now, I just said it was a remake, but really it's more of its own thing with some slight inspiration from the 96 version. The biggest difference between the two versions is that now there's a boss fight at the end of each world. But other than that, there really isn't too much to say about it. It's a perfectly fine game, but I still prefer the 96 version of Arrangement myself. Pac Man Championship Edition, not to be confused with the DX edition that came out in 2013, was a pretty big deal when it came out on Xbox Live Arcade in 2007. Not only was it one of the first big digital-only console games, but it was the final game developed under Pac-Man creator Toru Iwatani. You have to try and get as many points as possible under the time limit, and rather than having a whole maze filled with dots, it's only partially filled, and you have to clear each little section and then eat the fruit that pops up to get more dots to spawn in, all while avoiding the ghosts. While I definitely prefer the later DX iterations, this one is still pretty fun, and I'm glad it's preserved in this collection. Also, since this is just a port and not emulation, the latency isn't as bad as it is on the emulated games, so this is definitely one of the more solid titles on offer here. Pac Modos was a game originally made for Namco Museum Remix on the Wii. It's a remake of the original Modos arcade game with a Pac-Man skin. And if you've never played it, the goal is just to bump into the enemies until you knock them off the stage. and that's it. Somehow, it feels even more basic than the original Pac-Man, but it's fine, I guess. But I was never too interested in playing this for very long. Pac and Roll Remix is also a game from Namco Museum Remix. The idea is to roll Pac-Man around to get to the end of each area, but you have to make sure to collect enough dots along the way to get past the gates at each level. But it's really strict about how many dots it wants you to get, considering the fast-paced nature of the game. You'll have to constantly stop in your tracks and go back to get dots you missed in order to progress. And to me, that kind of disrupts the flow of the game. I'm not too thrilled about this one either. Pac Man Battle Royale is a newer arcade game that was released in 2011. You can have up to 4 players at once, and the objective is to be the first one to get a power pellet and eat all the other Pac-Men, while simultaneously avoiding the ghosts. Playing by myself, I couldn't really get a whole lot of enjoyment from it, but I could imagine if you get 4 people together, it could provide a few minutes of decent fun. Unfortunately, this collection doesn't have any online functionality whatsoever, and this game in particular really illustrates why that was such a missed opportunity. Pac Man 256 is the final game on here. It was originally an Android and iOS game, and back when it was first released in 2016, I played the crap out of it. It's a fun concept for a pick-up-and-play game, and it definitely helped me pass a lot of time during my senior year of high school, and it does a great job transitioning to a console game, in my opinion. It's inspired by the infamous Level 256 glitch in the original Pac-Man, and you have to constantly move up to outrun the glitch's garbage data while also avoiding ghosts. This was definitely a great addition, and it was really nice to have a way to play it without being littered with ads. So that's all the games in Pac Man Museum Plus. Now overall, while it's a decent collection, there's still some other games that I would have liked to see in a collection at this point. I understand there's some legal issues with Miss Pac-Man, but it would be nice to see something like Pac-Man World get thrown in. But at $20 or $30 on the Switch, it still isn't a bad value. And if you have Game Pass, it's on that as well, and may be worth downloading. But then you have the unfortunate issues with laggy emulation, which literally ruins the games that most people would probably be interested in playing. So for anyone who might have been interested in using this collection as a way to get into Pac-Man, I really can't recommend it. Even for hardcore fans, the only thing I could say is at least it's nice to have the original Championship Edition and Pac Man 256 available on physical media, and I'll probably buy the Switch cartridge later myself for that very reason. However, if you don't really care about that sort of thing and just want to play those games, well, the 360 version of Championship Edition is still available for purchase digitally and is playable on all Xbox One and Series consoles. And 256 you could download for free right now on your phone. Granted, it has ads. I'm just mainly disappointed because leading up to its release, this was being hyped as the ultimate Pac-Man collection, and while it's almost there, it's really held back by incompetent emulation, which makes me scratch my head because some of these games have previous releases on modern consoles where this isn't an issue at all. Now, I know there's always the possibility that an update could come out later to patch some emulation issues, but I doubt that's going to happen, as this just kind of feels like a quick cash grab. Anyways, what do you guys think? I played the Xbox version, and I assume the Switch and PS4 versions have the same issues, but I can't say it with authority, so are they any better or just the same? Let me know down below, and in the meantime, thank you for watching this review of Pac Man Museum Plus.
Rond comme un ballon et plus jaune qu'un citron, c'est du Pac-Man. Pac-Man. Gentil petit bonhomme poursuivi par les fantômes, c'est du Pac-Man. Pac-Man. Il court